virtually. However, she has done a very good job in terms of research. So for that, we can. My sense is she has some spiritual roots because she's coming from Minnesota, so probably some Lutheran background. But nevertheless, it's some good information that. So use that to take some notes. It's going to come pretty quick. The stuff that she throws out there. So I don't expect to get it all. If we have time, I actually have PowerPoint of some of those slides that she throws up there. That if we have a chance, we'll go back and hit them. Otherwise, we'll just cover some of the things from the notes. Any questions on anything? Everybody understand what we're doing? Or as we look at this, understanding the generation gaps and how to find common ground. This is her presentation, revival or not. Are we all set up there? Okay, we're gonna let her roll.
So I researched generational differences. That is the cover of my first book, Generation Me, about the millennials. No, that's not my stomach. I always have to close that up right off the bat. Yeah, no belly tattoos, at least not yet. So then I wrote a book about Gen Z almost 10 years ago now with that really long subtitle, just because there's so many interesting trends to discuss about this group. And the book I'm going to focus on today is called Generations, about all 6 living American generations and how technology and other forces have impacted all of us. So people love to talk about generations. So you probably heard some terms in this area before, like baby boomer. And if you don't mind, let's see by a show of hands, how many baby boomers do we have in the room? Awesome. Keep your hands up for a minute because I want the rest of the crowd to see that not all of you look like these people. At least not today. Thank you. So boomers were the hippies of the 60s, but then also the yuppies of the 80s and are still our leaders across many different fields. So then we have Generation X. That happens to be my generation. How many of my fellow Gen Xers are out there? All right, a lot of us today. I usually don't get a woohoo until I get to millennials. I'll just wait. Generational bonus points if you can name the movie that this picture's from. Anybody recognize it? Oh, I heard it. Yep, Reality Bites came out in 1994, right around the time we got our reputation for being slackers. You remember that. Okay, then we have millennials. How many millennials do we have here today? Okay, there's our woohoo. That's right. Took some time to find a good picture for millennials. I like this one because it has some of the technology. They also kind of look like they're in Brooklyn, like they just ate some artisanal cheese. Maybe some avocado toast. I don't know. That one's an internet rumor. I don't know if I believe that one myself. Then we have Gen Z. All right. How many Gen Zers do we have? Awesome. So I know it's good. It's good to have all the generations here. That is how we want to do it. Gen Z is the first generation to spend their entire adolescence in the age of the smartphone, and that has had ripple effects across many areas of their lives. So we also have another generation coming up after Gen Z. Nobody knows what to call them. I know we have at least one in this generation, maybe more. Do we have any alphas? There they are. See, we even have some alphas, which is amazing. Awesome. I've tried to call this group polars after melting polar ice caps and political polarization. And if you hear that groan, yeah, it's not going to catch on, unfortunately. I'm not a big fan of the letters because that's the thing. We have a problem. We ran out of letters with Z. What are we going to do? And I go back to the beginning of the alphabet, use the Greek alphabet, call them alphas. That seems to be catching on. Gen Z already has a name for this group younger than them. They call them crusty iPad kids. Because, well, first generation to never know a world without the iPad, and apparently they don't wash their hands before they use it. And that is how it becomes crusty. The parents out there know exactly what I'm talking about. So, how can we figure out how generations really differ from each other? I think the best way is to go straight to the source, to ask people, particularly young people, how they spend their time, how they're feeling, what's important to them. And fortunately, several large and nationally representative surveys have done that. Even better, some of them go back decades, and that's really powerful because it means we can zero in on each group when they're young and see what's actually different as opposed to just being a certain age. These are also very large. About 43 million people have filled out one or another of these surveys over the decades. So, why do generations change in the first place? The classic theory is that it's about historical events, economic recessions and depressions, pandemics, wars, things like that. And those do have an impact. But when you think about why is living now so completely different from what it was like to live 200 years ago, or 100 years ago, or 50 years ago? The answer to that isn't really events, it's something else. It's technology. And not just smartphones and laptops and the internet, but all types of technology and how they have changed our lives. So here's a couple of examples. So, transportation. Let's say that you want to get from New York to London. Well, 200 years ago, you better have 6 weeks and not get seasick. Now, you jump on an airplane and you're there in 7 hours. It's changed things a lot. This is one of my favorite examples, laundry. So, 200 years ago, this is how you had to do laundry. The open fire, the kettle, harsh chemicals took all day long, usually with other people. Now, what do? We put our stuff in the washing machine and go away and do something else. Then we're sitting there on the couch or whatever, and then we hear it ding, right? And then we're like, man, now I have to put it in the dryer. Like, we don't even think about how good we have it. Here's another great example. Just 100 years ago, average life expectancy didn't even break 60. And now it is pushing 80. So better medical care, longer lives. Communication is a great one. Well, I'm a Gen Xer. I remember this. I know there's baby boomers in the crowd who do as well. Like, that thing was so heavy, you could hit somebody with it. And it's avocado green. And see the dial? Do you remember, did you have any friends who had a lot of zeros in their phone number? Your finger would get really tired. So then we had cell phones, but they were flip phones. It was hard to text on them. You had to press the same button 3 times to get one letter on a text. Now, of course, we have the smartphone. So things have changed. So, pretty simple model. It's not just this, though. There is the direct effect of technology. There's also intermediaries. There's these secondary things that also really shape the culture and how it changes. One of those is individualism, more technologically complex society, more focus on the self and less on others. And the other piece is something called a slow life strategy that also happens when people live longer and healthcare is better and education takes longer to finish. So I'm going to start with that because that really explains a lot of generational and cultural differences. So I'll start with this example, which is playgrounds, because what do playgrounds look like now? Usually like this. The slides are plastic. That green stuff, that's not grass, that's that bouncy stuff, so if you fall, it doesn't hurt as much. Okay, Gen X and boomers, what did playgrounds look like when we were young? They were metal and had rocks. Yep. Nobody cared if we broke our arms. It built character. And that's not that great a playground, but even the fancy ones were metal and had rocks. And that slide was 300 degrees on a summer day, so you had to watch out for that. And it's not just playgrounds. We roamed our neighborhoods on bikes at pretty young ages. In a more urban area, it might look like this. And I know this is from the 80s. I know because of the socks. I had those socks. A lot of us did. but that piece of cardboard is for breakdancing, which is awesome. But you can see this is just Tuesday to them. On an afternoon in the summer, they would go and roam their city and come back when the streetlights came on. And that was their curfew, because that's how it used to be. So this is a bigger story that we drive our kids to school and drop them off. And we have good data on this. Even kids who live within a mile of school are now much more likely to be driven there than ride a bike or walk by themselves. So that longer life, longer education, that's the slow life strategy. People take longer to grow up and longer to grow old. In contrast to the 1950s model, where people had a lot of kids and just hope it worked out. That's how it used to be. So that was my mom's family, 8 kids on a dairy farm in Minnesota. And her brothers, my uncles, tell me these crazy stories like, oh, we went skinny dipping in the river and the neighborhood girls stole our clothes. They tell this story every single family reunion. So finally thought to ask one of them, how old were you when that happened? And one of my uncles said, I don't know, I think I was 8 or 9. I'm like, wait, what? Where are your parents when this is happening? That's my grandparents. But it was 1950, and that is how you raised kids back then. It was free-range kids. It was be home at dinner. It was, I'm playing bridge with my friends. Go and do whatever you want. That's how it used to be. Well into Gen X, even early millennials, that was the standard. That's the fast life strategy. Now, neither one of these is all bad or all good. Slow versus fast. They're just adaptations to a particular place and time. So keep that in mind when we look at some of the trends, because some of it's good, some of it's bad, some of it's neither. A lot of parents will say the opposite. Oh, kids are growing up faster because they have access to so much information online. Now, that is true. However, it leaves out the real world. It also has a really good dose of nostalgia to it. It has this idea that, oh, but when I was growing up, it was a much more innocent time. Was it really? I don't know. I think we have some photographic evidence suggesting maybe it wasn't quite so innocent. I'll start with this great series of photographs from the early 70s. At the beginning of this trend that lasted well into the early 90s, of kids and teens hanging out with each other at the roller rink. How many of you hung out with your friends at the roller rink? That was me. And then the younger millennials and Gen Z is like, roller what? You did what? But we all remember, you used to skate to Brick House and Funky Town and Celebration. You do the hokey pokey on skates and try not to fall down. There was the pressure of who was going to ask who for couple skate, right? This is what we did before there was Netflix, kids. So early 70s, of course, the first thing we noticed is the 70s clothes and hair. It's very groovy. But what really stood out to me when I saw these photographs for the first time was how adult these teens looked. They had the look of people who were making their own decisions. Now, they're probably the wrong decisions. Smoking, they're kind of all over each other. I don't even know about her shirt, like, a little too groovy. But they have this look of independence to them. So this couple has that. Then there's my favorite, which is this guy. And yep, that's a bottle of peppermint schnapps. Yeah, the boomers and Xers are going, hey, how'd you get a picture of my brother? Or they're turning to the person next to them and say, hey, Jeff, isn't that you? Yeah. So this guy's fun, but then it gets serious because check this out. What? How old is that younger kid? Like 10 or 11? Clearly his older brother, but his older brother's not like, hey, little brother, what are you doing smoking? You're 10. He's like, nope, let's just stand here and smile in our cool 70s pants. This is a time capsule. This is something that is pretty much unheard of today. And back then, they didn't think twice to have a stranger take their picture doing it. So one way to look at the speed of development is to look at activities like these 4 things. These are all things that adults do and children don't. So they've historically been milestones of adolescence. This is one of the big national surveys done in spring of the senior year. So most are 18, the rest are 17, and that's high school graduation year across the bottom. So we can see, for example, how many have their driver's license by the time they're about ready to graduate from high school. So that used to be 90%, and in recent years, it's been closer to 60. How many have tried alcohol more than a few sips? So that used to be almost everybody. And the most recent data that we've got, it was only at 50%. How many ever go out on dates senior year in high school? So that has gone way down. Now, I occasionally give a version of this talk to high school students themselves. And when I show them this trend line, the whole room erupts and they all start talking to each other. And I don't know exactly what they're saying. My guess is it's something like this. I don't know. Do you date? What about you? Am I a loser? I'm not sure. They're very interested in this, and they do still call it dating. I ask them. Having a paid job during the school year doesn't change as much, goes up and down with the economy. But even in years with really low unemployment, like 2022, 2019, those numbers were still lower than they were in the 90s or in the 80s. So that's behaviors. What do they think and feel? They're also asked about how eager they are to leave home and how eager they are to join the adult world. Hold on. There we go. So that's what that looks like. That it's not just that they're less likely to do adult things, but they are scared of adulting. And as young adults, there is that new word. Actually, it's an old word used in a new way. Did you know the word adult is now a verb? As in, please don't make me adult today. Or I am done adulting today. I don't know how that works. Do you go back to being a child? Apparently, yes. I'm in my fort coloring. I'm done adulting for the day. Now possible to take classes in adulting. Apparently, they teach you how to do laundry. Admittedly, kind of useful. It's not just adolescence, though. We also see this during young adulthood. So, for example, for women, that is the median age at first marriage and the median age at first birth. The baby boomer generation, 21, 22, and then it started to go way up. So if you've heard about millennials marry later, no, this is a trend that has been going on for decades. This is part of the slow life strategy. Here it is for men, never married versus married. And that has crossed for men in their late 20s. Some of this is for a good reason. If you look at the number of people getting a college degree, that has really accelerated. That's part of that slow life strategy, is more time spent in education. It also extends to middle age. So here's All in the Family. First episode came out in 1971. My parents loved this show. And Carroll O'Connor, who plays Archie Bunker here, during that pilot episode, you want to guess how old he was? Look at that picture, and he was 46 years old, which just blows my mind. People look and feel younger now than their parents or grandparents did at the same age. People put pictures like this online. Look at my grandma there. She was in her mid-50s. My dad, holding the baby, was only 26. People reflect on this, and there's actual studies about biomarkers showing that this is true, that middle-aged people are not aging as quickly as they used to. So development has slowed at every stage of the life cycle. That means these trends are probably not going to go away. They're not due to just economic cycles or things like that. It also means when you look at adolescents, I've heard people say, oh, they're drinking less, they're more responsible. Well, they're also not getting a job and they're not going out on dates. Is that more responsible or less responsible? It's really neither one. It's just that they are taking longer to grow up. And the same thing for young adults, that they are taking longer. The challenge for adolescents, I think, is this, that more are coming to legal adulthood, going to the workplace, to college, without as much experience with independence. And that can make that adjustment to adulthood really difficult. And we're seeing that quite a bit. So, marriage, children, all of that is pushed later in life. Has some advantages, fewer divorces, but it also means that period in the 20s is one of uncertainty, loneliness for many, many people. All right, let's talk about individualism. more focus on the self and less on others, valuing difference. We have all of that. It also goes hand in hand with the idea that you should think highly of yourself. You should have positive views of yourself. And we see this impact especially on young people. So Gen Xers heard some of this, millennials heard a lot of this, Gen Z still hears this, that the advice we give the young people is pretty self-focused. There's a lot of you in there, a lot of self, a lot of positive self-views in this kind of advice. What's interesting, though, is it's not just individualistic, this type of advice, it's delusional. I mean, let's look at it one by one. Believe in yourself, well, that's fine, but anything is possible? Nope, sorry. It's just not. You have to love yourself first. People who really love themselves are called narcissists, and they make horrible relationship partners. Just be yourself. What if you're a jerk? What if you're a serial killer? Maybe you should be somebody else. You can be anything you want to be. I want to be a dinosaur swimming through the swamp in the Jurassic Age. Nope, I am still here in Tennessee. There's limits to things. Never give up on your dreams. How many of you have seen American Idol, particularly the first episode of every season? Some people need to give up on the dream. Sad, but true. You are special. That's narcissism, not self-esteem. Probably not what we want to be emphasizing. Oh, and I know it's hard to see this, but I chose this image here for Believe in Yourself because someone is convinced that the first person ever to say believe in yourself and anything is possible was Miley Cyrus. I have my doubts. So did this work? That's one thing I was interested in. We have those messages in the culture. Did it have an impact on people? Well, let's look from boomers to millennials. Gen X is not surprised I left us out, just to simplify it. So the first few questions are college students, and they're asked things like, do you think you're above average? Do you think you're above average in your drive to achieve, your leadership ability? And you can see as it goes, self-confidence, in various realms. All of these go up. Some of them go up more than others, but they all go up. Now, why? Tempting to say it's something outside. The thing is, all the outside influences other than culture and what culture emphasizes would push these numbers down instead of up. SAT scores unchanged or down, so actual ability doesn't explain this. Demographic shifts, again, go in the other direction, especially the college samples over this time. More women, more Latinos, more Asian Americans. Those are three groups that scored lower on these measures, not higher. So all of these forces should have pushed these numbers down, and instead they went up. And I think because of the huge emphasis on individualism and positive self-views in the culture. Another downstream effect of individualism is less confidence in institutions. So we see government, news media, and just trust in individual other people has really gone down. Another effect is a trend you've heard a lot about, more than likely, which is the huge decline in the fertility rate in our country and in countries around the world. Now, there's a lot of different possibilities for why this has gone down. Economics, you hear a lot, but that doesn't seem to fit the data. What seems to fit the data when people have asked childless young people why they don't want to have children, the most common reasons are things like, I just don't want to, or I want to travel, or I want to focus on myself. So individualism is more than likely one of the major reasons why the fertility rate has dropped. And is that number going to come back up? My best guess is no. Based on the high school senior data, they're asked if they want to have children. Well, you saw that birth rate started to decline around 2007. So millennials were actually pretty much just as likely as previous generations to say that they wanted to have children. Then Gen Z, who's at childbearing age now, they are much less likely, especially among young women. Look at that drop. So I've shortened the y-axis. Most do still want to have children, but that is a pretty big change considering it didn't change for decades and decades at a time and now has really radically dropped. I'm sure you're interested in this one. Attending religious services. So we have our 3 different age groups, 8th graders, 10th graders, and 12th graders in this survey, national survey across the country. This is a pretty low bar. It's ever attending religious services at all. And here's what it looks like. Now, there's interesting trends there. That has been going down for almost 50 years. In the last couple of years, we have seen a little bit of an uptick, which I think is really notable considering how big that decline has been for how many decades. That we see any trend upward is noteworthy. And Dr. Burge will talk more about this, I'm sure, after me. But a little bit of a revival, maybe. So let's talk about technology a little bit. So I've been doing this work on generational differences for a long time, since I was a college undergraduate. I get used to seeing changes that were big, but they would take a decade or two to get there. Then about 14 years ago, I started to see changes that were bigger and more sudden. I had really never seen anything like it. So for example, more and more teens started to say that they felt left out. More and more started to say that they felt lonely. More started to say they felt like they couldn't do anything right, that they didn't enjoy life, that their life wasn't useful. These are classic symptoms of depression. Clinical level depression that really requires treatment also changed. It doubled among both adolescents and among young adults. And notice, almost all of that change happened before the pandemic, not after. So you've heard the adolescent mental health crisis is because of COVID. It is not because of COVID. So what happened? You see that change starting in the early 2010s, around 2012 or so. This was the question that I had. This is the question everyone has when they see these graphs. What happened around that time? Well, it wasn't the economy. The US economy was finally improving after the Great Recession at that point. It was tough to think of any event that happened around then that kept going throughout the decade. Then one day I came across a poll. Things started to fall into place. Do you know what happened at the end of 2012? Yep, this happened. Smartphones. The end of 2012 was the first time that the majority of Americans owned a smartphone. So the first smartphone, the iPhone, was introduced in 2007, and then most people had one by the end of 2012. 5.5 years. That is the fastest adoption of any technology in human history. And you can bring it anywhere you go, just like you see in this picture. And we didn't see scenes like this in 2009 or so, just a few years before, because you remember what we had back then? We had flip phones, which just weren't that interesting. You know, again, you had to press those texts, get three buttons, to one letter. You take a selfie because here's at my dog. Just wasn't that interesting. People weren't staring at it in public places in the way people were with the smartphone. And it's not just the phone, it's what people do on the phone. So using social media every day, for example, among high school seniors across demographic groups went from something that about half were doing to something almost all were doing across the 2010s. More recently, Gallup did a poll of teens and found that among these 6 activities, the only one that the vast majority of teens spent 2 or more hours a day on was social media. They also found that the average teen now spends almost 5 hours a day using social media when you include TikTok and YouTube in that total. That is a lot of time. Even early on, that made me wonder, what impact has it had on other activities, like getting together with friends in person? So here's what that looks like. Among adolescents and young adults, that time per day has been cut almost in half. It's also declined for older groups, but not by as much, only about 10 minutes as opposed to almost 30. And we really see this with the high school students and middle school students. Hanging out with your friends has been more than cut in half in these age groups. Same thing with going to parties once a month or more. That has also severely declined over this time period. And it's almost like this once Gen Z gets to college, even when they do go to a party, it ends up looking like this. And that's like an Unk Gen Z meme, given the production here, but still makes its point. Not a very fun party, though. Here's something else technology can interfere with: not getting enough sleep. So 13 to 17-year-olds really need about 9 hours a night of sleep. Sleep deprivation in this group started to spike right around 2012. Got a little improvement in the last couple years, but it's still at 50%, much higher than it used to be before smartphones and social media. There's also some downstream effects. Depression is not just about emotions, it's also about cognition and how people see the world. So we've seen a huge increase in pessimism among high school seniors. For example, agreeing that it is hard to have hope for the world, wondering if there is a purpose to life given the world situation. Probably many causes of this, the decline in religion may be behind some of this as well, but a lot of pessimism, even nihilism in this generation. Here's another downstream effect, because using technology is not just about how it makes you feel, but how it makes you think or not think, and the impact on attention span. So the number of high school seniors who say they have difficulty thinking or concentrating has gone up quite a bit. So, more time online, less time in person, less sleep. That is a terrible formula for mental health. And so I'm convinced that is why depression spiked. And we have those cognitive impacts, which we're only now starting to understand. And those other effects that are coming down the pike that you see from social media. All of the body image issues, social comparison. Everybody is always on vacation on Facebook. Have you noticed that? Instagram, girls and young women, the impact on their body image is severe. There's a lot of concern about deficits in social skills, anxiety about interacting with people. My undergraduates tell me that all the time, that they're often afraid to talk to people. One young man told me, I like texting better. I can think about what I'm going to say. There's not as many surprises. He said, because when you talk to somebody face to face, you never know what they're going to say to you. I'm like, no kidding. Really? But that's what they're used to, that electronic communication. And I think this piece about pessimism has really not been considered as much, because there's both a personal and a political impact to that. So we see the idea of, why should I try? It's all rigged. And then we also see a lot of this impact in the way people talk about political issues, particularly on social media. It's nihilistic. This is the worst time ever. Really? Is it really? This is really the worst time to live? Even in the last 50 years, I think we can think of a lot of times that were worse, like at the beginning of COVID, or maybe the early 90s at the height of the crime wave, or when boomers were getting drafted into Vietnam, the Great Recession. The idea that right now is the worst time, I think, is a hard argument to make objectively. So I'll end with a little story. A few years ago, my husband and I went to the U2 Joshua Tree 30-year anniversary concert. Yeah, I know, very Gen X of us, right? So the thing is, I'm not cool. I had not been to a rock concert in about 20 years. You have to stay up too late, it's a little loud. So I was surprised when Bono said, let the lights come out. And this happened there in the stadium. So what are those lights? A phone, right? You can put on a flashlight, you can hold it up, it's kind of pretty. And I was sitting there thinking, that is not what lights in the stadium used to look like, right? Because what did it used to be? It used to be a lighter. You'd hold it up and say, play Freebird, or whatever the Gen X equivalent of that is. So it got me thinking about cultural change and how things have shifted, that we have these technologies that were supposed to connect us, but have ended up making us feel disconnected, that have coincided with this adolescent mental health crisis. Yet we have so many advantages of living today, that we do live longer with better medical care, more education. We've done a good job of protecting kids from physical dangers. It's just we've moved to protecting them from experiences. And when you do that, then they end up on their phones all the time. But I do think there are advantages. You know, you can use technology for so many good things. I love the Maps app. I don't know what I would do without it. Smartphones are not all bad. Among other things, you know, you can pair them with your watch, count your steps, be healthier. You can also, as you see in that 2017 picture, use it as a flashlight. So then you can make sure you don't trip in a dark room. That is a great metaphor for what we need to do moving forward. That is what we need to do. We need to find a way for technology to light our way instead of darken it. Thank you very much.
Thoughts before I give you my thoughts. Steve.
I think she forgot something. When she found out we need to focus on our own lives. And I think all generations do not see the potential in other people.
Yeah. Here, I'm going to give you this. That way they can hear you on the other side of the room and online.
Get our focus off ourselves, and what is your purpose for tomorrow? What's going to happen? How are you going to build up another person? I agree with it. You know, the politics and everything. It can really just be a cloud over matters. But to sit down and just actually talk with people, how they're doing, and interject conversation again. I liked when she said about the connections, that we talked about that in one of our pancake breakfasts, and I tried to point that out. All the hardship that they went through, nobody smiled. But that sometimes is because of bad teeth back then in the early part of the century. But they just went through such hard times. And when they showed Carroll O'Connor, I think he was 46 there. He certainly did. He looked 20 years older than that,
Right.
you know. So,
Yeah.
but that's good and bad, because if people are just not going to connect, you eventually, you're going to catch up. But I would certainly think Carroll O'Connor is a lot more enthusiastic than a lot of depressive kids in their 30s today, than what they've gone through, because they haven't gotten out of their bubble.
Yeah. And I don't think she was really trying to, she really didn't bring any answers to how do we go about it. She basically was just trying to be a reflection of the surveys that and the studies that have been done. And the challenge and the question is, how do you address it? Because the big thing that is on individualism. Individualism is a bigger problem now than ever because of the social media, because of the smartphones. And so, as she mentions, one of the crucial things happened in 2012 when the average person had a smartphone. And so that is a big challenge now. I mean, anytime you pretty much go anywhere, people are on their phones, and that phone consumes them. And I think that study, even she mentioned that it was a few years back where they're on social media 5 hours. I think it's more now. And the interesting thing is, who do you think's on social media more? Is it women or men? Women by far. Yeah, women are on on social media, a lot more than men, um, by a few hours actually. So, anything else stand out to you? I mean, as she mentions this focus on self, she also mentioned that. Now, what I don't agree with her is she says, because that slower life can become an excuse, in my opinion. Of Because I mean, we've had our kids, and maybe you have as well. As like, you know, I don't like being an adult. I mean, the things that some of our kids have said is like, I would have never thought about that. You take the responsibility and you grow up. And most of us had responsibility growing up, some type of chores or something, but many of our kids now, they don't, they want to put off adulthood, and to us that just seems weird. But to many adults, young adults, that is, that's you think of the popular advice that's given him, as she mentioned, it's all self-focus. Be yourself. And like she said, what if you want to be a serial killer? That's You don't want to be yourself. Those there are limits, and also there is a need for accountability. Right. Any other? You had a thought or question? No, no, Bill here.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that the smartphones and internet and all that is very much interesting to a lot of people, and you can find just about anything. Even if you need to repair something, you can
Yep.
get a video
YouTube's
of
great.
it, and it all helps. Uh, but the thing is, behind all this is the news media and education, where these people are more into education, and that's where they're getting propagandized. And so this is a little bit beyond what she's saying. I'm just saying behind all that is the fact that the educational system. We've had people in education teaching that should have been fired long time ago because of the socialism and everything you see, and they're all getting this. And to me, that's part of the blindness.
And education is a big issue, but it's not just education. What is the number one influencer in a child's life? Parents, but also as they get older into their teen years, what is it? Their peer group. So it's not just education, it's the peer group. There you have actually five influencing agents, and the home is one, education is another, and the peer group has got the greatest influence in their teen years, which is a full impacting them. So it's I mean, I certainly see the challenges in the educational system, but there are kids like myself can go through the education system and actually, and Jennifer says, well, you're different, where I saw the hypocrisy and I saw the challenges, but many can come under that influence. And what the education can do is give them an opportunity to challenge the values of the home, and go in a different direction, and then find a peer group that goes along with that. So, but you have a society that has stressed individualism, not just when the smartphone came along. How long have we been talking about individualism as a country? Come on, you guys know this. No, since the founding of our country. That's the whole aspect of liberty and freedom and individualism and the ruggedness. The guy out there out there in Kentucky on a farm. To be able to make it himself. The difference is what? There was solid values to which they could fall back on. The home was in a stable position. The church was at the center of it, of their lives. And so when you start removing those things, the aspect, then what? This becomes a god. And so when that's a god, then therefore you find everything that affirms it. Now, and she briefly mentioned it, but I think it is of a great concern, is the bots, the AI, where there are bot girlfriends and boyfriends. There are many teens that are like the AI is their closest friend. That's scary. Yeah, you got a comment?
I just want to say,
Go speak into the mic.
uh,
Speak into the mic.
they
Thank
were
you.
talking about when you start with the individualism, mainly they got away with thinking of others. They became more selfish. They thought of themselves instead of thinking of others and putting others first and how others feel.
Yeah, yeah, and it's not that this now. I don't necessarily agree with her, but she basically does point out something. She says basically it's neither right nor wrong. It's just this slower life strategy. I have a tough time with it. I would say I could recognize it as being true, but I have a hard time accepting it because at some point it's going to crash. I think it's going to come to a place now. Other countries are starting to recognize this. What is it that Australia just did? Do you guys know?
Was under 16 or not on-
Yeah, under 16, you're not allowed to be on the internet, and they're even
Australia.
Australia. Pretty liberal, and even encouraging parents not to give their kids phones until they get their driver's license. Now you think, well, wow, okay, Australia. Well, where else? France and even the UK have passed laws that if you're under 15, not to be on social media. Because of human trafficking, because of all the bad influences, because of the distraction. One of the things, if you remember, because everything came pretty quickly, didn't it? It came very fast, is the concentration level and the lack of sleep. How many hours are teens supposed to get? At least 9. What are the average they're getting? Around 6. Okay, so they're getting up and going to school and they're tired and and then they got all the activities of the day. You know what the average amount of time they're spending in homework? If they're if they're in social media 5 hours, how much time do you think they're doing homework? An hour and a half to 2.5 hours is the average. Yeah, not a whole lot. So more than 4 times. Yeah, so there's a good one. One of to show you the social media every day. These graders. And now the interesting on this particular chart that's put up here is that you see they're all areas of increase. And in terms even ethnic groups and males and females. And the males would be the blue, and the females are that pink one or purple one. You see quite a bit of difference in terms of that, and so how that has changed. So is it going to make a difference if we take the phone away? It's very possible. They can they can realize that they can survive without it. We often have to end up doing that with Lily, taking the device away because it can be very self-absorbing.
The females is at the highest, right?
Yes.
Okay, because they were the ones that were on that. She showed that depression level.
Mm-hmm.
And they just skyrocketed
Yeah.
in these last couple of years.
Yeah, actually, and as a matter of fact, you remind me of something that I want to point out before I get. Here's some concerns for me. Fertility rate at an all-time low. That should be concerning to see how low it is. Now there are 2 groups actually that are in our culture that are more than 1.7, which is about the average American, Caucasian family. There are 2 groups that are over 2%. You know which groups they are? Well, the Amish, yeah, I'm not really considering them as part of the society, but yes, you would say the Amish too, would that be true? But Muslims, what's the other group? Hispanic. Hispanic because most of them are Catholic and have a strong family value, and Muslims because they want to repopulate the world. So those are the 2 groups. Hispanics, I think it's around 2.1 to 2.3. Muslims, if we don't really know the data yet, it's 3% maybe to 4%. We don't know because the average Muslim family, how many do you think they have? How many children do you think the average Muslim? Around 6, yeah. Some of them up to 12, So that's a concern. And then she mentions what the big challenge is with what we're seeing results of this is depression, loneliness, and she said this was the fastest assimilation of any technology in history. Within 5 years, that is amongst all society. You just whether it's the car or whatever technology you think about in terms of assimilation, it usually sometimes takes a decade or so for everybody accepts that. Within 5 years, that is kind of crazy. Now, what do you think when she mentions that as she looked at this? Is that so you hear them, and maybe have you heard this? Is like, today is the worst time to be alive, and America is not the greatest place. And it's like, where else are you going to go? It really is a delusion because it does not match reality.
Mhm.
So the thing is, if it doesn't match reality, the question is, where are they getting the information? And so I think there's a number of them. Yeah, it's the social media, it may be peer group, it may be educational system. All these things are influencing. But what is the biggest challenge we're seeing is that mental health is a biggest issue that teens are dealing with today. Because mental health, and we've talked about that before, it encompasses the large area of whether we're talking about suicide, whether we're talking about depression, whether we're talking about anxiety. And Now, I'm not saying the phone is the result of it. I'm saying the phone facilitates it. Okay. And just as there are many good things, like maps and also information you can get, it also can become an avenue for greater harm as well. All right, I got about time for one more comment, and then I'm going to give you some of my feedback on what I think, how to move forward. Just 3 simple points. Colleen.
I don't think anything she said surprised me. I think we're aware of that.
Yep.
But it really did make an impact to actually see it in the graphs and the charts. I really think that if there was just some way to get that out to everybody and say, look at this.
Yeah.
This is what we're talking about. But it's like, yeah, that really drives it home.
Yeah, one of the things that is a very clear thing, I like even the very beginning where she shows the generational gaps. I mean, you are dealing with some very big generations. And so, like the millennials kind of gets lost in this. And it's like, wow, at one point we used to think, wow, the millennials are nuts, but actually the Gen Z is like, wow, they're the ones that's going to be. I see Gen Z similar to the baby boomer in terms of their influence. The baby boomer generation is still affecting us and impacting us with, they're still in power. And I think the Generation Z is going to have the same type of influence that the baby boomer did in terms of going forward.
Real quick. I just think it's really interesting if you're in a grocery store and you see these little tiny toddlers being appeased with their phones, their mama's phones, and they're watching these phones. It's going to be interesting in 10, 15, 20
Yeah.
years to see, they've been on it since infant, being
Yes.
an infant.
Yes. Yeah, the influence of having toddlers, having, and even in kindergarten, they're giving kids iPads, and in grade school as well. She talks about that later on in the discussion as she's being interviewed by John Stonestreet. And then she did a presentation after that in a breakout session, and she talked about don't give kids iPads, don't give them anything. She said, in her opinion, no one should have availability of social media or to the network unless they're being monitored by a parent until they're able to drive a car to show some aspect of responsibility. And I thought that's good. All right, I'm going to give you 3 things I think that are helping us to bridge that gap and find common ground. 1, we have to accept the fact that your will never be, you will never be as tech savvy as they are. The generations that are coming up right now in the Gen Z, we will never be as tech savvy as they are. Matter of fact, we sometimes have to give our phones to our grandchildren so they can help us with them. Okay, so that means that we need to be a learner and ask questions and be willing to accept help. So there is an aspect of humility to be able to, we can learn from them and actually be able to build a bridge in that way in terms of a relationship. And then that's the second thing, focus on the relationship. And so insist on face-to-face activities. How many of our kids, grandkids, you call them, they don't pick up the phone. But if you text them, they will. They don't like talking on the phone. It's the craziest thing. But you have to then insist on some face-to-face activities where they have to focus on interaction. And then third, there needs to be a technology ban. That is, limiting smartphone presence at meal times, establish boundaries for technology use by having a smartphone tablet rules that you agree to, that you actually need to say, here's the rules that we agree on. Can we agree that this is what they are and what those limits are? If you don't, then it becomes kind of like the free range kids. You just go wherever you want. In the technology, they go wherever they want. And so there has to be limits and accountability to be able to establish those boundaries. All right, that's all I got. Another Fellowship Sunday as we try to focus on real issues that are going on in the world and how we might respond to them. This is available on live stream, so if you want to go back and watch it, you can later, or if you have someone else that would find it valuable to make use of that. Let me close with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for this group and for this time that we have. May you be honored in our life, and we'll give you the praise for it all. In Jesus' name, amen.